Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Finn Hardy, the Vice President of the West Hill Community Association. The West Hill Community Association is an all-volunteer nonprofit organization serving unincorporated Skyway-West Hill area, 98178. And we're focused on creating a more equitable, vibrant, informed, and engaged community. I remember when Councilmember Zahilay was running and we had a voter town hall at Dimmitt Middle School. That was my first chance getting to know him. So we're really grateful that you're here with us this evening to talk about important legislation. And please do find out more about West Hill Community Association by visiting mywesthill.org/join. So Councilmember Zahilay, we are interested to know more about what this recent fireworks ban means for our Skyway-West Hill community. And we have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And then we're also taking live questions, so those will save until the end. But if you are joining us on YouTube or Facebook, please do submit your additional questions via the chat or comment feature, and those will be forwarded on so that we can include them here. All right, so we'll also do our best to get to all the questions, but we are going to limit our time until about 8 o'clock. So we want to get as much information as we can about this firework ban. So just so you have kind of an overview, the questions come in a few different categories. The first is about enforcement and police involvement. The second category of questions is about public input. Then we'll ask a little bit about community engagement and education, and then future action steps that our community could take. All right, are we ready to get started? Okay. So historically, fireworks in Skyway-West Hill have been prevalent and a lot going off during different seasons or events. And it seems that this might be difficult to enforce. Can you talk about how this policy will be enforced?
So I included an amendment in the legislation that would remove police enforcement and provide an unarmed non-police enforcement mechanism. So as everybody knows, or should maybe not know, but should know, this July 4th is the status quo. Nothing about the new ordinance takes place. Next year, it will all be education. There will be no enforcement and no citations. The year after, in 2023, by then we will have created a new system of enforcing this that does not have police involvement, and hopefully it can continue to be an educational experience.
And so what is the community involvement in enforcement in the years ahead as we look after this year with just status quo?
I encourage everybody to make sure that you spread the news about this new law. There might be many people who still don't know about it. And part of the benefit of this new law is now Skyway is consistent with all of its neighboring cities, which also ban fireworks entirely. So there will no longer be an inconsistency just by going a block or two up and down. You can let people know, hey, starting next year, fireworks won't be allowed anymore. And not some fireworks or other fireworks, but all fireworks will no longer be allowed. And just so people know, before this legislation passed, firecrackers, the kind of loud ones, the really aggressive ones, the shake your car kind, those have always been illegal at the state level.
Thanks for clarifying that. And so when we look ahead to 2022 and beyond, how will enforcers determine who is culpable? Do you have to be able to witness a violation happening? Will they investigate each instance? Will they collect video or photo evidence? Will there be eyewitness statements? If you could answer that first part of the question, and then I'll ask the second part.
The answer right now is a resounding, I don't know. We're gonna have to make sure that we create an equitable process for making or choosing whoever the enforcer is going to be. And that process also has to be have community input and make sure that it's done in a way that makes our community safer and not less safe. And so we have 2 years to figure that out, and we will.
Yeah, and the second part of the question is just the potential impact that this could have on someone's life as a misdemeanor on their permanent record, or levying significant fines that could impact them financially. How do we ensure that people are not wrongly charged?
That's a great question. So my intent is that once we remove this function from police, that we can have an unarmed non-police enforcer. And because that it would be a King County agency, hopefully, we can determine who gets cited and who doesn't based on criteria that we developed alongside community, especially community that's most at risk for being harmed by criminal records and things like that. We can talk through and make sure maybe we're only citing people who are repeat offenders. Maybe we only cite people who are actively causing harm, shooting firecrackers at people or committing arson, those kinds of things. Those are all open possibilities based on my amendment that I introduced. And in terms of the fines and fees, originally it was going to be $1,000 and my amendment brought it down to $250.
Okay, that's good information to know. So this next question kind of asks about some similarities between this fireworks ban and what we're doing about marijuana legislation. So states are repealing marijuana prohibitions. And this person who asked this question says, because we know that recreational products can be used safely by adults, and we must stop the mass criminalization of Black and Brown folks. So why does it make sense to ban safe and sane fireworks when the issue seems to be more with the larger fireworks that were already illegal at the state level?
Sorry, my dog is still going crazy. Part of the issue was the inconsistency. You know, if you go to the neighboring cities, all fireworks are banned, and then you go to Skyway and some are allowed. And that creates a whole issue where people don't know what's allowed and what isn't. And that kind of creates this funneling effect towards Skyway, where everybody on the outside is thinking Skyway is the only place where, at least in this area, where fireworks and firecrackers are allowed. Because again, people don't really know the difference between firecrackers and fireworks. So every year you have this situation where people from outside of Skyway are all heading towards Skyway to blow off their fireworks. And that creates a lot of issues around pollution, safety, litter in small business areas. And the people in Skyway are the ones who have to pay for that. And so this is a huge and legitimate issue. On the other hand, you do have the criminal justice aspects, and that's what my amendments hope to address. Make sure that we're not increasing police contact, we're not having $1,000 fees for people, that we create an enforcement mechanism that is developed in partnership with community, that we actually take the time to think through, and we have some time to do that.
Sorry. That addresses quite a few points in the next question. Just, the current law says that police will enforce this starting in 2023. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's kind of what this legislation says right now, which could lead to more negative interactions between police and BIPOC community, how do we mitigate the danger of neighbors overusing 911 for this type of incidents?
So I would go back to my answer before, that the enforcement mechanism won't be police for this. So they can call 911, but I've spoken to the sheriff's deputies that exist in Skyway right now, and their whole goal is just education. They're just going to do education, and they're not the enforcers for this. So I'm going to keep pointing back to the amendment around that.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the questions that we had ahead of time about enforcement and police involvement. And the next few questions are about public input. And so one person noted that listening to public comment, it sounded like most of the folks who were for the ban were primarily concerned about the loud, dangerous display fireworks and explosives that are already illegal that we've mentioned before. And many stated that they were fine with the safe and sane fireworks, such as sparklers and cone fountains. So what was the driving force behind making this a blanket ban and not first exploring ways of better enforcement or education of current laws?
Yeah, so in terms of the driving force, it's the consistency. We don't want a situation where the entire surrounding region around Skyway believes that Skyway is the place where fireworks are legal. And in terms of enforcement, it's really difficult to determine who's doing legal fireworks and who's doing illegal fireworks. It just creates a really complicated system for some parts of our surrounding neighborhood, Seattle, Renton, Tukwila, Skyway, to have one set of rules, Skyway to have a different set of rules. And even within Skyway, some fireworks or firecrackers being legal, some being illegal, people not really knowing what the difference is. And so the driving force is creating public safety through consistency.
Okay. And so also, with regards to public input, many people who have spoken publicly in favor of the fireworks ban are white. However, we know that many BIPOC communities celebrate their history, their culture, and traditions using fireworks, and they might not be as vocal. So as a representative voice of Skyway and our BIPOC community, why did you vote in favor? Can you talk a little bit about your thought process there, and how you would explain it to the BIPOC community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I want to take a moment to give a longer answer here because I would say that the topic of fireworks has been one of the most frustrating issues in my year and a half on the council by far. And not because it's the most difficult or most important topic. You know, we've had to deal with COVID-19 this year and mass unemployment and the economy. So there are definitely more difficult issues, but this one, no matter what side of the issue people are on, they think there is a clear-cut right answer here, whether they're pro the ban or against the ban. The people I've heard from or who talk to me or message me think their position is so obvious and so clear-cut that they don't even understand how I could grapple and struggle with this decision. And that's far from the case. Almost more than any other issue I've dealt with during my time here, the issue of banning fireworks is one that has several valid public interests that are competing and in direct opposition to each other. So on the one hand, we have people who contact me supporting a ban, you know, get rid of it and enforce the ban. They completely ignore, dismiss, and belittle all the things that you just talked about, Finn, which is the criminalization of BIPOC communities, interfering with people's cultural celebrations, drying up nonprofit revenue, burdening low-income communities with more fines and fees and records. They literally act like these are non-issues, probably because these factors don't affect them the same way they affect others. And it's frustrating to deal with that. On the other hand, you have people who tell me, don't vote for the ban. Fireworks are part of our culture. Many, and not everybody says this, they act like people who want the ban are just whiners, complainers, sensitive party poopers. That's an equally frustrating position. When I talk to the fire chief of Skyway, a man who I trust very much, a Black man, mind you, the fire chief and fire chiefs all around the region, they tell me in the week of the 4th of July, they have to prepare and set up their plans and infrastructure as if they're preparing for a big natural disaster like a tornado. The fire department, they're telling me that they have to deal with houses and cars burning down, bushfires, people blowing off their hands, people blowing up their internal organs. Like, this is an actual story they told me. I don't know how I can possibly argue with fire departments about these very real issues. And again, when people say that that's only firecrackers and not fireworks, no, fireworks cause these things as well. They also burn down houses, and the asymmetry, the issues with enforcement issues when people think that Skyway is the place that has legal fireworks because of a misunderstanding between firecrackers and fireworks, and the difficulty of enforcing something when things that look similar, some are legal and some are not. those create real issues. And not to mention the noise, the PTSD, the pets, huge amounts of pollution and litter all being funneled toward a community that is 70% people of color, highest proportion of Black people in the state of Washington. These are all real issues. So no matter which direction we pull in, we're going to inevitably harm another set of public interests. So I challenge everybody today, when you ask your questions and make your position known, to think about what the other side of your position is and who will be harmed from it. And if you're not really thinking about the other side of this, I have to think about that. I can't just focus on one side of an issue. So my job is to take into account all these factors and support something that on balance puts Skyway in a better and safer position. And I don't think there's a compromise that's going to be perfect. If you think my amendment is flawed, I think it is too. I'm critical of it too. But I can tell you that I think the status quo was worse than my amendment. And I think that the ban all out without my amendment is also worse. So that's really my answer, is that it's a really difficult position. All of the things that all of the criticisms and all of the positions that I just heard from in that question are all valid. I don't know how to properly balance all of these things in a way that achieves every goal. I can only do the things that are that I think on balance put Skyway in a safer position.
I appreciate you kind of talking through each side and probably what a difficult position you were in to try to make this decision for our community. But I just wanted to get some clarification around this amendment that you brought up. So the amendment does not directly say that there is no police enforcement. Rather, it's that in 2022, the council can choose how to proceed with enforcement. Is that correct?
Once the executive branch, in consultation with community, comes up with what the non-police, non-armed alternative is, then we'd vote on that too.
Okay. Well, so this is important for the community to kind of understand how they can be involved in this decision making as well. So someone wrote in to ask, given that we know fireworks are a hot topic and opinions are split, like you've just described, for all these various reasons, why was this legislation not sent to the ballot for a general vote instead of being voted on by council?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Do you have any idea if in 2022, when they're looking towards how to enforce this, will that be put on a ballot for a community to provide their input?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So it might be interesting for us to find out how we get something onto the ballot as opposed to just a council decision. So that's work for us to do. Now a question about
that I would just mention is, when we put things on the ballot, it's the majority that decides how things go. And so having the nuances around, how things are criminalized or not criminalized, the fines and fees, and taking into account the interests of people who are not the majority, I think is harder to do on a ballot as compared to council members taking into those account through equitable processes.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and also a point about voter education and making sure that our community is really civically engaged, right, through voting, if it does come to that. So about community engagement and education, what is the plan for making sure that this information is available to all of our communities, at the point where people are buying fireworks, maybe, at the point where they are just in conversation with others? So how are we making sure that this information, without getting muddled and misinterpreted, gets out to the community? And this person points out that relying on handing out information to violators in 2022 is not really going to get the word out. So how do you plan to reach everyone in the community, including providing information that's in folks' language, so it has language accessibility and it's easy to understand? So yeah, can you speak to that piece a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. We have so many tools in our toolkit for reaching communities, and we have good examples of that in past projects. So I think we need to work with our Department of Local Services. We need to work with our local small businesses. We need to work with local organizations. We need to work with the fire department and the fire chiefs, and in case the sheriff's office as well, to have a coordinated educational strategy so that we can get information out to as many people as possible. And like the question asker said, not just the people who have committed violations, but proactively, with in coordination with small businesses in their storefronts, holding town halls like this one, going to specific places where we know that people have a digital divide and no internet and maybe speak English as a second language once the pandemic is over, and holding in-person meetings and town halls and events that way as well. I'll continue to push things on all my social media channels and in the Rainier Beach community group, and through newsletters that we mail out to people. All of those things we definitely need to do to get the word out.
Sorry about that. We hope that that communication is successful for informing our community. And now a couple questions about looking to the future, and what future action this community could take. So we see that in your amendment, there's language about studying how this might impact the BIPOC community. But that study seems to have a 7-year timeline. So why are we going to have to wait 7 years for a study to tell us if this law is going to negatively impact BIPOC communities? The question asker notes, we know that increased criminalization does already, whether it's the police handing out the criminal and civil penalties or some other entity. We're doing nothing to change the historical pattern of who calls the authorities on whom and who pays the toll. So the question was about this 7-year study and how that came about.
Well, I think it's always important to check in and see how a new law is doing. I don't think we should just sit back and say, well, we know this thing is going to act like this, so we shouldn't continually self-check and make sure we're doing things well. Anytime we have a new program, especially one where we're saying that we're going to have unarmed non-police enforcement, well, if that new agency is doing the same kinds of things that police have been doing, that's a problem, and we need to know about that. So I don't think it's an issue to continually study and improve, and we will keep studying and improving as we go along.
And is 7 years a typical timeline to study something like this? Are there communities that have studied impacts of legislation on BIPOC communities in a shorter time frame?
I don't know the answer to that, but I don't see this 7-year period as being, we're not going to self-assess anytime between that 7 years. That is, the longer term one that we'll look at for a more comprehensive report. But in the meantime, as usual, we're going to hear stories from people. We're going to continue having the opportunity to engage with people who have positive or negative experiences. We're going to continue to uplift the voices of people who are most vulnerable to police encounters or to criminalization, and regulate and self-assess and self-improve and do better as we go, especially since, as Charter 5 and 6 passed this past year, now we have a real opportunity to shape a more equitable system of public safety. And I look forward to doing that with the Skyway community.
Yeah, I do appreciate that there is this piece about not just letting this legislation sit there, but really being proactive and looking at its impacts over time. So a final question of ones that were pre-submitted, and then we'll go into some live questions. What recourse do unincorporated King County residents have if they disagree with the legislation that was passed by the council? Can you help explain how the process of selecting issues, drafting ordinances, and passing legislation works at the council level, and where the touch points are with impacted communities along the way?
That's a great question. If you want to pass legislation, your first step would be to meet with me in my office, because we work directly with Skyway community members. We can propose legislation to the council, and then we have to get 5 out of 9 votes to actually pass it. The other way that you can do it is to go to the King County executive, and the executive is the one that sets budgets and proposes a way of doing things and then transmits that to the council, and we have to approve the executive's plan, again, 5 out of 9 votes. So whenever you want to create policy or do something better, meet with me and we can go from there. I would say that, as usual, the most effective way is to build a broad base, a broad coalition of people in the community. And then that way you can elevate an issue, have that grassroots support, and then bring it to me. I'm not somebody who likes to unilaterally top down make change, but instead respond to grassroots movements and get legislation across the finish line that speaks especially to the needs of people who are most marginalized in our community.
Thanks for that response. And so segueing off that, you making sure that you're touching base with different stakeholders and that they can also come to you, so it can be a two-way conversation. Do you have any insight into what the Skyway business community's opinion of the ban was? And if you had any conversation with Skyway businesses?
Yeah, I heard a lot about litter and noise and people coming from outside of the community, and those are all things that I heard. All the things that I mentioned before about the public safety and the noise and the litter and the pollution.
Okay, thanks. So another person is asking live, why were the study and strategy for enforcement not conducted before voting?
The study and enforcement, the study can't be done because it's not happening. The study's goal is to say, how are we doing with this new law, and to make sure we're doing it better. And in terms of the enforcement, the way we want to do it is make sure that first and foremost, we prioritize the public health, the public safety, and that consistency that I was talking about. And then we have a 2-year period where we can have the time and space to create a good system for making sure that the public is aware, that we're not criminalizing, that we're not increasing interactions with communities of color and police. That's what the 2-year period is for. If we wanted to delay for another multiple years before acting, I think that would be a big problem for people who are experiencing fires and trauma and all the other negative consequences of fireworks that I mentioned before.
Yeah, and so to build on that, or on the flip side, why is it taking 2 years to enforce? Why are we doing this year of status quo and then the year of education? Someone is asking, I've watched fires damage property and people fear staying home and also fear being away from their homes, for fear of not being able to put out fires, since firefighters are stretched thin during these periods of high firework use. So why is there this 2-year waiting period?
The first year is status quo as mandated by state law. We have to give a 1-year notice period for a legislation like this. The second year was because I wanted to make sure that we're listening to the BIPOC communities who are afraid of a police armed response, the criminalization aspects, and making sure that we have enough time to educate the public. So I'm hopeful that the 2-year period helps us find a compromise and the best situation possible in terms of getting the word out and making the best public policy possible.
Thanks for that. So I actually have a question, which is, since our neighbors, City of Seattle, City of Renton, City of Tukwila, already have these regulations in place that people are not allowed to be using fireworks or firecrackers, has any research been done into what the impact has been on those communities that have had this legislation in place since I don't know how long, but what is it like for those communities during high times of firework use around 4th of July or Seahawks games or whatnot?
Yeah, this is a really important question. I wasn't able to find a comprehensive study of, whether firework bans are criminalizing people in our area. I haven't been able to find that, but I have talked to police and I have talked to fire departments and asked what is the impact. And consistently across jurisdictions, what I've been hearing is people are not going to jail over fireworks or getting misdemeanors or being criminalized over fireworks unless they are actively doing things consciously to harm other people. Firing fireworks at people, arson, blowing people up, those kinds of things. But in terms of actually, walking around, citing people, giving them misdemeanors and the criminalizing and what I'm hearing is we don't even have the resources or the person power to go around and do that and focus on those things when, we're stretched thin as it is in terms of homicides and things like that. That's what I'm hearing.
Thank you. So from Facebook, we have someone saying, I've been doing a fireworks show for 22 years in Skyway at my home. Is there a way to get a card or some kind of pass to keep this going?
I believe permitted firework displays are still allowed.
And that can be for a resident, not necessarily a business or organization?
I have to look that up. I'm not sure the difference between resident and business, as you mentioned, Finn.
Okay. So that concludes the questions that we've received both before this and live here. And I just want to steer folks to the West Hill website. There's some really great information in the most recent blog post that came out on May 1st that includes kind of infographics about what exactly is banned and really explains what this new legislation says. But of course, there are still things that are confusing, a little bit gray area. And so thank you so much, Councilmember Zahilay, for answering some of these questions. I'm sure there will be more to come, so we might need you to help us in the future. But before we log off, we'd like to ask as a community, knowing that there are more issues of importance to our community, can you give us a high-level preview of what other important legislation or decision-making is happening at the county level right now or in the near future that would impact Skyway-West Hill? What should we be paying attention to, and how can folks stay informed and get involved?
Yeah, first thing I'll say, Finn, is that every fourth Friday of every month, I hold an open meeting with Skyway community members who want to hear about what legislation is coming up, what issues impact Skyway. And we have all kinds of King County departments on giving individual updates from their agency, whether it's, our housing department or our metro department. And so I invite anybody who wants to be part of those calls with me and my team and King County agencies to send us an email so we can loop you in. My email is just my first name dot my last name at kingcounty.gov. So a few things that you should watch out for. First of all, we had some major and huge wins for Skyway last year in the budget. And so getting updates on those is really important. We got $10 million of seed money for a Skyway community center. We got $10 million of participatory budgeting, which means the community gets to direct how those funds are spent on capital within Skyway. We got $6 million for metro expansion to make sure that we have more public transit options in Skyway. We got $5 million for affordable housing in Skyway. There's going to be a tiny house village in Skyway to house housing unstable or unhoused Skyway residents. That's happening in partnership with the church in Skyway. So those kinds of updates you can find at kingcounty.gov/council/Zahilay/Skyway. I know that's a lot, so let me say it again. kingcounty.gov/council/Zahilay, which is my last name, /Skyway, and you'll find project updates in there. There are also other things that are really important, like the King County Sheriff's Office and the duties of the Sheriff's Office. As you know, we proposed Charter Amendments 5 and 6 last year, and they passed on the ballot. So now we'll have an appointed sheriff as opposed to an elected sheriff. And also the King County Council can change the duties of the Sheriff's Office to ones that are more equitable. And so we'll give a bigger voice to people who are, like you mentioned earlier in the fireworks conversation, Finn, more harmed and impacted and over-policed. And so if you want to share with me and with the council what you think our future of public safety and policing should look like in unincorporated King County, make sure to join us on the first Tuesday morning of every month at 9 a.m. To give public comment in my Law and Justice Committee. My Law and Justice Committee, again, which I'm the chair of, takes place on the first Tuesday of every month at 9:30 a.m. So come give public comment, tell us what you want to see as the future of policing and public safety in King County. And guess what? Tomorrow is the first Tuesday of May. So we will have a Law and Justice Committee meeting tomorrow morning at 9:30. If you would like to join, again, send me an email and we can send you the details for how to log in or dial into that, girmay.zahilay@kingcounty.gov. I'm also working on a just cause eviction ordinance, which would make it illegal to evict people for no reason. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's obvious, why? That's not the law right now. Right now, we have no cause eviction, which means people can get kicked out of their homes for no reason. But just cause eviction will allow renters and tenants in unincorporated King County to have more housing stability and other tenant protections. So you should look out for just cause eviction, which I'm a sponsor of. We just passed Best Starts for Kids, which is a renewal. You're already using your property tax levy to pay for all of the things that make a young person's life better, from pre-K all the way through young adulthood, programs and services that take care of our youth. And we just passed an ordinance to renew Best Starts for Kids, which means it's going to go to your November ballot this coming November for you to vote yes or no on to renew that. So again, not a new property tax levy, but renewing one that's expiring. And this time around, it would raise $872 million for our youth across 6 years. I'm also working on something called ranked choice voting, which will make us have a more equitable system of voting in King County. A little bit harder to explain right now, but please reach out if you want to learn more about ranked choice voting. Also working on King County Airport stuff and making sure that as we address climate change in our region, we're also addressing airplanes and the growth of our airports and how that impacts communities like Skyway and other parts of my district like Beacon Hill, where people are living under noisy flight paths and breathing in carbon emissions and particulates. I also passed legislation around gun violence to support community-based organizations who are doing gun violence disruption work. Again, not responding to gun violence in a way that increases policing and incarceration and all those things that we know do more harm than good, but instead empowering community-based organizations to do what they're already doing, which is form relationships, de-escalate, and make sure that our various spaces that are at risk for shootings are less at risk. And finally, the elephant in the room is COVID. You know, we continue to work on COVID-19 through COVID budgets that go to funding vaccination and testing and rental assistance. And so if you want to learn more about COVID budgets, please do email me again and we can connect you to our Budget and Fiscal Management Committee where we report out how funds are being spent and what we're doing in response to COVID-19.
Well, there's definitely a lot going on. So we really appreciate that you were able to take the time to join us this evening, Councilmember Zahilay. And we also want to thank the community for sending in thoughtful questions. We've even had a few that have come in kind of after our question period. And so I'll just read them with the hope that you can respond to them and we can possibly get another blog post up with some frequently asked questions and your responses to them. For example, like what are the rates of fires in the past year that have happened due to fireworks in Skyway-West Hill, which might be a question for our fire chief. And so, you know, I think our community would still like to have some answers, and we really do want to make sure that this legislation doesn't negatively impact our BIPOC folks. And you know, we appreciate that you really take the time to think through this and all of the different sides that are here and voices. And so please keep communicating questions, things that aren't clear about this legislation, either directly to Councilmember Zahilay and his team or to West Hill Community Association. We do really value our place in the community as being a conduit of information, sharing things with you all. So thanks everyone for your time and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.